Hi everybody, and welcome to Chapter 2's latest edition of the Talent Ed podcast. Our podcast is an opportunity to interview leaders from the HR, employer brand and recruitment industries. And it's just an opportunity to discuss the state of the current job market and the future of recruitment and employer branding. And we are really excited today to speak with Tom Denny, the head of people at Codat. Codat, through their single API, provide real-time connectivity to the financial software used by SMEs. And to make their lives easier, they create an ecosystem of completely connected software and services. Codat have had an extremely strong year in terms of growth. And are now currently sitting at around 100 employees. So we're so excited to speak to Tom today to understand how they've achieved it, some of the successes and some of the challenges that they've experienced along the way. A big welcome to Tom Denny, who joins us today from Codat. Tom is the head of people at Codat. And so I've already obviously introduced you. And the work that you've been doing at Codat, but I don't think I've necessarily done it justice. So a big focus for us here at Chapter 2 and with the Talent Ed podcast is a chance for us to bring industry leaders from the recruitment, HR, employer branding landscape in. Just to talk a little bit more about their experiences, your experiences, and your insight into your world and what it's been like to scale over the last few years. So we work with larger corporations, but a big focus for us as well is to work with scaling companies from seed stage onwards, and sort of give them some guidance and some insight into what they need to think about when they're scaling their teams, whether it be the people that they need to bring into their business, the processes that they might need to implement, and also, technology as well, I'm sure plays a big part in that. So Codat, as we were saying, has had a very busy year, and there's some great accolades to you and the team there. So you've obviously been named as one of the Otter Rocket List top 50 fastest growing companies in London in 2021, which is fantastic. You've received over £15 million worth of funding since 2020, which is huge. You've more than doubled in size in terms of headcount, now sitting at 118 employees, which is great. And of course, you have launched the US operation in New York as well. So a busy year, considering that there's also been a global pandemic. It sounds like you've had a lot going on. So yeah, do you want to just kind of give us a bit of an intro to you and to Codat and what you've been up to over the last year?
Yeah, absolutely. Good intro there. Let me start with Codat. We are a fintech organization headquartered in London, but as you mentioned, with now an office in New York, and we also have a very small team in San Francisco as well now. We build a single API that integrates directly with all mainstream accounting platforms, with the premise of enabling small businesses' financial data to flow freely into financial service providers. Our customers are those financial service providers, whether they be banks, lenders, payment providers, etc. And what we're doing is enabling them to build future-proof products upon the data infrastructure that we're providing to provide a better landscape for their small business customers. And I often talk about how I think that we're unique as a startup in many ways, but one in that we are genuinely solving a real world problem with our product. We're not a company that's identified a shiny piece of tech like AI and try to find a product market fit. We actually identified a problem first and then built a solution to it. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've seen such quick growth and quick success as a business. Our product is unnecessarily complex, and I don't want to bore you too much by going into it. But hopefully that's enough. Intro to me. I had a really varied background since leaving university. Studied graphic design and then decided never to do anything with that ever again. Did 10 years working in retail management for various companies, and then decided about 6 or so years ago to have a complete shift in my career, and actually moved into recruitment, starting right at the bottom again, moving into the city and working for a pretty large recruitment organization specializing in technology recruitment. Did that for almost 3 years, and built up a lovely network of customers that I worked very closely with, and one of those customers happened to be Codat. And that relationship came about by kind of pure chance. Our now head of engineering was Codat's first employee, and Jason is married to a very old school friend of my other half. So I've known Jason for a very long time. And funny enough, when I went into recruitment, called him up and I said, I'm going to be specializing in C# engineers. Do you know anything about C# engineers? Because I knew he was a software engineer of some sort. And he said, yeah, I am a C# engineer. So I used to buy him beers after work, and he used to teach me about C# so I could be more knowledgeable when speaking to candidates. So when he then joined Codat and the founder said, do you know any recruiters that know what they're talking about? He said, funny enough, I know a guy who knows everything I could possibly have taught him. That's how that happened. So I met them when there was only 4 of the guys here, and left that first meeting thinking, I don't even think these guys are going to pay an invoice. Is this going to actually work out? To a kind of a 2-year relationship, growing the team up to about 24 people. And after doing that for a while, to my surprise, was then approached by the founders and asked if I wanted to come on board permanently to help lead the growth of the organization. Funnily enough, the kind of the premise of me joining was really to bring recruitment in-house, to manage those processes, to help us to continue to scale at pace. However, actually it came to light very, very quickly that only about 20% of what I was going to be doing was looking at that recruitment piece, because there was so much on the people side that hadn't been looked at for the first 2 years of the business growing. We were still very small. Our kind of official / unofficial HR manager was our CTO, and I think he had been kind of lumped that position with a kind of no choice of his own. So quite quickly found that I needed to do a lot of operational side of stuff as well. So that's kind of how I got to where I am today. Kind of an interesting swap of going from recruitment to having a real focus on kind of people operations side, and it's been a really fun couple of years, because I definitely would be the first to admit that I kind of fell into people. I've never done HR or people before, but I really enjoy it. It's something that I, if you'd asked me 10 years ago if this is where I thought I'd end up, I would never have suspected it, but I'm very, very pleased that I am.
Yeah, and I think from all of the sort of scaling companies, startups, scale ups that we work with, really a lot of the time the feedback that we hear from them is it's about being agile, and it sounds like it was very similar for you as well. When you're working in that environment, you may not have a fixed department or role really, because actually you've got to be able to be a bit more fluid and work kind of with the greater goal in mind, and make sure that you can pivot with that. So it sounds like it was a similar case for you, but that it's taken you to a good place in terms of where you wanted to be. So just going back to that time, you said 24 people when you first came in-house at Codat, and what was the sort of feeling within the company then? I mean, that's still relatively small in comparison to where you're at now. So how did that feeling kind of start? And then we can kind of have a look into how that's evolved up to 118 employees now.
Yeah, absolutely. So funnily enough, when I joined, we just moved into our current office, which I think is about 3 3.5 times bigger than the previous office. So we felt like we were kind of rattling around quite a big space suddenly. So much so that we hadn't even kind of put all the desks in because there just wasn't even any need for this. So we just had this huge floor, empty floor spaces, and definitely felt kind of a bit more grown up suddenly. We're on the very top floor of a building, and I joke that we've got the penthouse suite, but it feels that way. And yeah, it felt like a small startup. It really did at that point. I had never worked for a sort of sized business before. I'd worked for huge organizations like Apple in the past, so it was very different for me to suddenly be in an organization where there was only 24 other people in that room. But what was really lovely about being in a team that size is, hugely collaborative. I often talk about how there's no one at Codat that's saying that's not my job. It's always, what can I do more to help? And that was really, really prevalent at that point. We didn't have an IT function or office managers or anything like that. So, I was often crawling around on the floor installing people's PCs to make sure that when they joined us, they were all set up, or making sure that we had fruit and milk being ordered and the cleaners were set up to come in each week, and all these random things that aren't necessarily what you signed up to do, but there's no one else going to do it. That's just the nature of a startup. You just have to crack on and be useful for everybody else. That was super fun, but that didn't last very long, funnily enough, because I came on board just as we'd been awarded a £5 million grant through the government's BCR Capability and Innovation Fund, and what part of that kind of the money that we'd received there was us saying we were going to accelerate our roadmap dramatically, and really for us what that looked like was hire lots of people to do lots of work faster. So I joined in July 2019, and by Christmas we'd doubled in size. So it was about 6 months. So maybe it's prevalent in my mind because it was the last Christmas party we had, which feels bizarre to say, but I still remember that our CEO Pete stood up and did a really lovely little speech at that Christmas dinner and said that he couldn't believe that the Christmas party previous had been 8 of us, and now there was 42 of us, and that felt like a mad year to have had, but that was very exciting. And growing from 24 to 42 in 6 months, it was a big shift, a big change, and we suddenly felt like we were a much bigger organization. So yeah, I thought it was a long-winded answer to your question to say it felt like a really lovely kind of small, close-knit team, and I think it still does. Don't get me wrong, it's just a different beast when you're suddenly over 100 people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's, it's not a long-winded answer, because actually it kind of sets the scene to where you were at then. And then obviously, like you said, you had that cash injection, and you knew that the way forward was to bring lots more people in. So that's interesting, because when that happened, was there like we need to have a clear strategy of who we need in this business, and also how we're going to go about getting those people, because finding top talent to your business is really hard, and I think sometimes smaller sort of scale ups and startups worry about who they should bring in, and then actually when they know how they're going to go out and do that, and how they're going to compete as well, potentially with some of the big tech firms and things. So was that kind of a clear strategy from the beginning?
Yeah, we have an amazing strategy team here at Codat who are superiorly more clever than I am, and think about all the things that I would never even think of being able to think about. And they work closely with me to define what our growth model looks like, what are our core areas for growth, and what sort of people we need to hire and when. So that helps drive our hiring plan, and we define a hiring plan at the start of every year, and it gets redefined almost every quarter. But it's really important for us to have a clear path for growth. What is interesting for us is when I joined, and for that first 6 to 9 months, our strategy towards recruitment very much was utilizing recruitment agencies. my speciality was software engineers, but wasn't going to try and fool anyone that I was knowledgeable about how to hire marketing people or salespeople, because I just didn't know. I could give it a good stab, and I knew how to speak to candidates and do candidate experience, but to go out and find people is a whole nother ball game. So I would focus purely on the engineering side when I had the time to focus on recruitment, and then we would just utilize partners that we'd had for a couple of years to do the growth across the rest of the business. That shifted as we went into the pandemic, as the market went from a candidate-driven market to a business-driven market, and hundreds of thousands of people were unfortunately let go from their roles, and we suddenly found that by putting a job on our careers page, we were getting 200, 300, 400 applicants in a week suddenly. So we stopped needing to rely on recruitment agencies quite quickly and started to need to manage the strategy of how we could deal with that volume of candidate and maintain our standard of candidate experience.
Yeah.
The other side was for us ensuring, and this hasn't changed from day one to today, in that we have an absolute no compromise hiring policy. So when it comes to hiring the right people, we will maybe not happily accept, but accept that we will miss perhaps a target or a deadline because we haven't got the right people on board. But use that time to focus on hiring the right person or finding the right person. We hire amazing people and have an incredibly intelligent, driven team, and that comes from making sure that you wait until you find the right person, rather than just hiring someone because you need someone there, and that person turning out to be a bad hire, and that's short-sighted. That hurts you in the long run far more than waiting 2 or 3 more weeks to find the right person. So for us, it was about identifying who we needed, what sort of roles, and then taking the time to identify who was going to be right for that role.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's interesting to hear you say about, with the pandemic and everything, how that sort of change things, I suppose, almost overnight, which is scary, because you have to then be able to pivot and move with what the market's doing. So it sounds as though you guys were sort of on top of that, and you were working with it, And what about employer branding? Was that something that was on your radar as well, as when you were a slightly smaller scale up, kind of ready to hit that trajectory?
It was on the radar for sure. I used to talk a lot about how I thought we were the most exciting startup you never heard of,
Yeah.
and how we wanted to do something about that. We wanted to get our name out there more and more. And it's very hard when you're a very, very small company, and especially when you're a B2B middleware infrastructure type business like we are. We're not a Monzo or a Starling bank that's going to attract hundreds of thousands of individual customers, with a B2C product. So it's far harder to create a name for yourself to a candidate market when you're a product that's very orientated towards businesses rather than individuals. So it was on the radar. For the first 9 months of me being here, it was more a case of us doing all that we could to work with the right partners for recruitment, to ensure that we stood out from the crowds by providing excellent interview experiences and candidate journeys, so that when someone had heard about us, they thought this is really exciting. But it was about getting that first kind of hearing about us part that was the challenge. Something that we've done a lot more of in the last 12 months, now that we've got more people in the people team. Zach, who's one of our talent acquisition managers, has worked really hard on this to start creating more content that's going out on LinkedIn, to doing lots of days in the life or sit down conversations with members of the team, just trying to put more content into the world, that hopefully when someone does hear about us or finds out about us, they want to kind of dive down that rabbit hole and find out and see that we are a really cool place to work. Also, especially helps when you've now got a marketing team in place, as we now do. They're doing all of the work to get our name out there more, obviously towards more of our customer base, but just by doing that helps create a more of awareness of our product and our business as well. So it's a challenge. It really is something that we're going to continue to work more and more towards. We've got a few plans up our sleeve, but I think a lot of it is going to come through natural growth, our business and our product becoming more widely known and building our customer base, and then the team growing larger and larger, so our network generally becoming bigger as well. So it's yeah, we're not, you're not going to see tube adverts for Codat, I don't think, anytime soon. But it's about that candidate experience, I think, for us that's important.
We that absolutely, that resonates so much with us. We always talk about like having a window into your world. So Codat's a great place to work, and you've got some great benefits and inclusions as part of being part of the team there. But you can have all of the best things in the world, and if people don't know about it, then they don't have that window into your world. And so a lot of the time, it's about putting really small steps in place with things like content creation, like you said, and just kind of snippets. Even on your website, I noticed there was some bits about women in tech, which is obviously a very current topic and something that people are genuinely interested in and want to know more about. So, I think that's always good, just giving people that little bit of a window into your world so that you can understand what's going on and what it's like to work there a day in the life at Codat, exactly like you say. And we also find as well, which is interesting that you mentioned about the marketing team, that a lot of the time there's a huge amount of marketing work going on, but potentially, focusing on the customer side and the client side. And actually, it's still about the people, isn't it? It's still about the people working within Codat. So that content is probably, I'm not saying in Codat's case, but with many scale-ups, we say, actually, the content might already be there. It's just about how you're using it. So it's not about just your brand, it's about your employer brand as well. And they kind of go hand in hand, which sometimes I think potentially companies don't do enough of, making sure that they are working in collaboration. But it sounds as though you've got some good things planned. And like you said, with the move to New York as well, there's a lot of exciting things going on. So lots to be talking about.
Absolutely.
And then just thinking out, how you kind of do stand out from those big companies, like you've mentioned. You might not be as big as Monzo or that sort of level of name, but you've also had huge success in bringing people on board. And so how do you think you can, is there any kind of processes, I suppose, that you would say that you could look at, even technologies that you've seen as successful for those scale-ups that are at the start of their journey that they might consider investing in or putting in place?
Yeah, I think technology plays a part, but actually I think that a lot of it comes down to you as an individual taking a real personal approach.
Mm-hmm.
For us, as I've alluded to, providing the right candidate experience is the most important thing, I think, in my eyes, for growing effectively.
Yeah.
I think it's far too common, unfortunately, these days to interview for a company and then not hear anything back for a week or 2 weeks, and then even if you're kind of told that you're progressing or you're off the role, it's not a great experience, especially when you're rejected. I think it's really frustrating when you waited all that time.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
the data is out there that says that we as individuals tend to make a decision on someone within 5 or 10 minutes of meeting that person. So why should it take 5 hours or 5 days or 5 weeks to let that individual know that you thought they were good or not? It doesn't make any sense to me. So we take an approach to candidate experience, which I called hand-holding, but funnily enough, I've met someone yesterday who described it as white glove treatment, which I really like. I'd never really thought about it that way, which is very much kind of guiding the candidates through our interview experience personally. So we do everything in our power to communicate verbally or face-to-face with all candidates as much as we possibly can, whether that be introducing them to the business, talking to them about the role, understanding more about them, providing them with feedback, letting them know that we've scheduled them for an interview. We'll follow up everything with email so they have it in writing as well, but it's about having that personal touch of getting a phone call. I want by the end of that journey, that person to feel like they've already made a connection with the talent team. They've got someone at Codat that they know really well because they've spoken several times. We then move forward into an interview process where we will never have more than 2 face-to-face stages. I think that drawing interview stages out is totally unnecessary. Making candidates jump through too many hoops is unnecessary. You've got to be seamless and streamlined, especially versus competition where there are companies who will regularly introduce multiple stages where you're repeating yourself to just somebody new. What is that company actually learning differently from that interview stage? And we often will say, if we wanted to interview that candidate again, someone will say, I think I might need to speak to that person again. The first question will be, what are you hoping to learn from another conversation? What do you hope to gain from speaking to them again? Quite often the answer is, I don't know, actually, I'm nothing. And it's like, okay, well, we don't need that stage then. And I think that's really important. For us, we also have introduced what I've loosely coined hosting Hangouts during the pandemic,
that sounds
which is
fun.
it's terrible. But what's really positive in my eyes is I've spoken to probably hundreds of candidates in the last 12 months and still haven't heard anybody say that they've seen any other company doing this. So for us, what we wanted to do when we decided to start hiring at the start of the pandemic, so I think I could hear myself breathing. When we decided we were going to start hiring remotely at the beginning of the pandemic, we thought, well, what can we do to in somewhat replicate what it would be like if they'd come in to meet us in an office? For us, I'd always ensured that we as a people team were the ones that were greeting candidates when they arrived, doing little things like offering tea, coffee, water, then sitting down with them in our little reception area and making small talk. And that was a very purposeful exercise to put that candidate at ease, to try and let them settle and relax for a moment, because it's scary coming in for an interview. People get nervous, and actually sometimes those nerves really affect your performance. And we want to see the best of an individual. We don't want to see them really struggling through an interview. So we would sit with them for 5 or 10 minutes, make small talk, try and make them feel at ease, hopefully just kind of let them settle and go, you know what, I'm here now, it's okay, I can breathe, and now I'm ready. So I think that's worked really well when we've done it in person. It was like, well, how can we do that now that we're doing it remotely? So we introduced hosting Hangouts, and we use Google Hangouts. Hopefully that's clear for our video calls. And so what that looks like is someone from the people team will join that Hangout call first, welcome the candidate into the interview, make small talk with them for a few minutes, make sure we can see and hear them if they're doing a presentation, make sure they know how to use Google Hangouts and how to present their screen, make sure there's no technical difficulties, make that candidate feel at ease from the start. And I think this is even more important when you are interviewing remotely, because you've just got that nature now where you just click join that call and you're just immediately in interview. And I think that's just bizarre, like that concept of kind of the immediate start and that pressure. So that's kind of the purpose here. When we're ready, we would then Slack the interviewers saying we're ready, and the interviewers join the call, and only when we've said that we're ready for them, and then the people team would leave. We also do this at the end as well. So when the interview is ended, the interviewers will Slack us back saying we're ready for you to rejoin, and we come back in and we do a wrap up or a debrief at the end of the call, almost acting as a bit of a kind of a mediator between that candidate and the company. Of course, it's weird because we work here, so we always kind of almost joke about the fact that we've got this kind of strange bias, of course, but the candidate should really view us as being on their side. We want to make sure that they're getting as much out of this experience as we are. So any further questions they have, anything they didn't feel comfortable asking in an interview itself, or anything they'd like to know more generally about Codat as a business that's going to help them aid their decision. If it's a final interview, I will always say, at this point, we've done everything that we want to do to decide whether or not you're right for us or not, but this is a two-way street.
Absolutely.
We may make you an offer, but you may not have all the information you need to decide whether we're the right company for you. So please take this opportunity to ask any question you could possibly think of to help you aid that decision. And that sometimes can be a 2-minute conversation, and sometimes it could be a 45-minute conversation. It doesn't matter for us, because I think that's super important that that candidate gets that level of experience. After that interview, we would then hold what we call hiring committees. So we do these if we immediately after interview, if not within kind of 15 minutes or half an hour of an interview ending, where we get everybody that's been involved in that interview process together, and we get immediate feedback. We hear directly from them. We prioritize the order of feedback from most junior up to most senior on purpose, because we don't want anyone feeling like they need to influence their feedback because their manager has said something differently to what they were thinking.
Great point, yeah.
And then we would then feed back to the candidate immediately after that hiring committee. So in an ideal world, and quite often we manage to achieve this, that candidate will have had feedback from us within an hour of their interview ending about whether it went well or not.
That is fantastic, yeah.
If it's gone well and there's a further stage, we would then say, this is what the next stage is. I'm going to send you an email letting you know that information. I need you to just let me know when you're available and I'll get you scheduled in immediately. And then we would just repeat the process all over again. I think that's enabled us to be really successful with our growth, and it's enabled us to stand out versus the competition a lot. We have had several candidates say, I can't believe how quickly you've moved, how efficient you are with your hiring. I've been waiting several weeks to hear back from X huge company with amazing brand awareness. And you know what, I'm going to go with you guys instead, because I really love that you treat us like people, like humans, and we want to work for an organization like that. So it's working. Hopefully it continues to work, touch wood. It's a lot of effort. It's a huge, really resource intensive, but it's totally worth it in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean that sounds like fantastic advice, and also a great process to have in place, because whilst it might be resource heavy and potentially cost a little bit more in some way, it's completely getting away from a couple of things really. First of all, that sort of bums on seats approach, where you're just filling the role with a person who may then not be right for the business for whatever reason, and then you may have to go back to starting that process all over again. But then also, I think people or companies, whatever size, maybe take for granted that you need to want the candidate to work for you, but like you said, they want to work for you as well as you want them to work for you. So it's got to be a two-way street, hasn't it? Absolutely. And I don't know statistically, but from everything you've just said, I would imagine that for all of those roles that you've been putting out and candidates that you've been speaking to, when you get to offer stage, you're probably not having many of them then say no, and you're starting the process all over again
Exactly.
with job descriptions and posts and things like that. So I think that's really, really helpful.
The reason why we're called a people team rather than a HR team is because humans are not resources. We are people.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the things that we do a lot of is ensuring that we continuously remind ourselves that we are all adults, we're all grown-ups, and people should just be treated that way. I think we could all probably relate to working for a company at some point in the past where it's felt like we've been treated like children, or policed like we're at school still, and really kind of dictated upon about when we could take a lunch break, or how we can go outside, or some sort of arbitrary rule that just seems to be in place for no reason at all.
Yeah.
We do as much of the opposite of that as possible to show not only trust but just faith in the team, that like, you've been hired for a reason. We know that you're going to be able to do an amazing job. Let's just do it now, and let's not worry about all the silly, pernickety little rules or kind of guidelines that you need to put in place sometimes. And I think that comes down to recruitment in the same way. If you treat people like people, they respect you and they look after you as well.
Yeah, of course. And so just to finish, tell us a little bit more about what you've got in store at Codat over the next months and year. You're obviously continuing to grow, and with some exciting new locations as well. So what can we expect to see from you and the team at Codat?
Yeah, it's the last 12 months have been amazing. As you said, I think we almost tripled in size in 12 months. It's been very fun, and our plan is to not slow down really. So our hiring plan currently, as it stands, sees us grow to past 200 people this year. So we're pretty much doubling in size again in 2021. We are going to be focusing a lot on the US now that we've got that presence over there. So the team in New York is currently 5. They're probably going to be about 45 or 50 people by the end of the year. We suspect that we may have a small presence in San Francisco as well. We've already got our VP of sales based out there, so it makes sense for him to have a small sales team based around the valley over there. London's going to grow considerably again as well. Our London office is probably over 50 or 60% software engineers now, and it's our technology hub, and I think that's really important for us to have that in-house technology team. So we're going to see that. We've got our eyes on potentially a couple of other regions, so we'll see. All will be revealed, and some more other exciting things on the horizon as well that I'm sure you probably will hear about soon enough if you continue to follow Codat along the journey. But yeah, it's going to be a lot more of the same, but for us that's always exciting. I have become a bit of a cliche in that I find myself continuously saying now is the most exciting time to join Codat, and I have genuinely been saying that for about 3.5 years, and I still believe it to this day, just because something new is happening. It was a different reason why it was exciting to join when there was 10 people. It's a different reason why it's exciting to join now when there's 120 of us. The US function is extremely exciting, also a little scary because it's a little unknown for us. I think many of the team, including myself, are looking forward to the restrictions starting to lift and us being able to travel over there and see the team and really continue to make sure that they feel like they are a part of Codat rather than just a satellite office, which is absolutely not our intention at all. We want everyone to feel like they are Codat no matter where in the world they're working. So having them fly to London and having the London team fly out to the US is going to be a big part of that, I believe.
Yes.
So that's really exciting as well, and many opportunities coming along as well for personal and professional development as we scale. We see many people who are perhaps the first of a function as we've scaled some new parts of business that are now stepping into lead roles to manage those teams and grow those functions out, or multiple opportunities for people to step into other more senior positions, whether they stay or remain individual contributors or end up leading a team of some sorts. As you naturally scale, those people that are here are front and foremost in line to be selected for those promotions. So we talk a lot about there being a world of opportunities at Codat. So I'm very excited about what the next 12, 24 months looks like, even beyond that. And I think that we will be a far bigger and even more exciting company by the end of this year. And I'll be still saying now is the most exciting time to join Codat.
Well, you just said, it'll be a lot of the same, but the same sounds pretty impressive so far. So may it continue.
Exactly. Yeah, don't get me wrong. Yeah, the same is fun.
Yeah.
Just doing a lot more of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Tom, for giving us your time today and your insight. It's been absolutely really helpful to anyone watching, and those scale ups, like I said, that are really at the start of their journey and want to know where to go from here. So thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks. Bye.